Today, I'm speaking with Tom Parks, a web and brand designer. Tom has worked with agencies like Instrument, Justified Studio, and MetaLab, and he's freelanced for companies like Microsoft and Airbnb, and now he's at my company, Glide, where he leads web and brand. We've worked together for a long time now. Many of the motion projects that I've done over the years involve Tom, in fact, probably all of them. So it was really nice to be able to sort of sit back and lean back and reflect on stuff long form rather than just crunch ideas for a deadline as we usually do. We talked about a bunch of things, kind of the activity and craft of design, and particularly talking about design, which I found really interesting. Sensitivity and receptivity to design and art. That was a big topic that we spoke about. Design in agencies versus in-house, which of course he has experience with both. The difference between art and design, the kind of true value of brand strategy, how design is merging with motion in a sense, and Tom particularly for his skill set, and of course, much, much more. If you're actually interested in getting a much deeper dive and more context on design at Glide, you can check out my other interview with Tristan, VP of Design at Glide. Tom and he go way back, and it was cool actually in this interview to hear a little bit about Tom's perspective on the relationship between web and brand design versus product, particularly at Glide. So as always, to support the show, give it a rating wherever you're listening right now, or share it with someone after you listen. And I hope you enjoy this interview with Tom Parks. Cool, Tom. So just to be clear, for everyone watching, we don't know each other, right? We've never met before.
No, absolutely not. No.
All right. Who's a better designer, you or Tristan?
Tristan by a long shot. He's the man. I love that guy. I think everyone at Glide loves him. He's my guru.
No, I'll ask you a sensible question about that later. But I guess I wanted to start with something that's probably quite useful to chat about in regards to your origins, which is and for people who don't know necessarily about design in depth, like me, is there a difference between visual communication and graphic design, or how do you think about that?
Yes, I think graphic design refers to the actual skill set of arranging things on a page, whether it's color and form. I think you can do visual communication in a myriad of different ways. Whenever I think of graphic design, I always think of like the courses that I did at university. So basically, that was a lot of technical learning. So it'd be learning things like InDesign and printing processes and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's why the term for me, graphic design, isn't. I don't use it anymore. I think it's slowly kind of faded away. I think visual communication is more appropriate for this day and age because um, it's not really bound by skill sets and technical prowess. Really, at the end of the day, visual communication for me is just what it says on the tin. It's communicating visually. Um, yeah, I think that's
So
what.
like conceptual or branding or like strategy, is that what you're talking about?
I think visual communication for me still lies within the realms of things like typography and color. Um, but I think visual communication can encompass motion design, for instance, whereas graphic design is purely like a kind of a fixed state. But I think that yeah, for me, graphic design, it's I wouldn't say it's kind of like a dying thing, but I think that we're really entering this age where we can't really. It's almost a little bit tricky to kind of pin ourselves down with like these kind of labels, for instance. Uh, I would say visual communication design for me, like it was the all-encompassing term that I had at university that described a lot of different courses. So like there was digital design in there was like spatial design, there was like textile design. It all fell within visual communication. So yeah, it's I think it's nice to keep things broad and open. I find that's kind of helpful as to instead of kind of pigeonholing things. Yeah.
Hmm. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that and like your training side of stuff, like what I guess really opening up in long form, like what the craft of a designer is or what it could be in relation to what you did. So you studied visual communication. Like what did your day to day or week to week or month to month look like when you were studying that?
Yes.
And-
Yeah. So sorry to cut you off. Funnily enough, when I went to university, I wanted to be an industrial designer. I remember Dad took me to an industrial design exhibit when I was about 15, I think, and we got to see all these really cool things, like these cool drawings of like farming equipment. This was New Zealand, by the way. We were all obsessed about sheep and farming and stuff. So a lot of it was like these cool looking toys, basically, and I was like, man, that's so cool. I'd love to get involved in that. And I actually changed a lot of my secondary school courses to do industrial design. I also thought it just sounded cool. It's like it's like a almost like a Tony Stark, like Iron Man kind of way of looking at the world. But um, I tailored a lot of my first year classes to industrial design, and I found it just wasn't doing it for me. Like there was something about using real materials and kind of going in the workshop and trying to like hammer stuff, and I found it a little bit like I don't know. It was a little bit of a ball ache. Like I wanted to, I think I wanted things quicker. Um, and I actually found that the where I moved into more kind of like, I guess at the time, graphic design was I just liked doing the layouts. Like I liked putting the sketched car next to the typography, and just laying out these big boards. And I think that's what I actually liked about industrial design, not the process of making products and objects. I guess that was my kind of like awakening. And then yeah, ever since like in our second year, we learned what typography was, and typography was something that was never really spoken about at school, and I'm not even sure if it's spoken about these days. But because you're starting to really get into the mechanisms and the working of how visual communication or of how my kind of what I love, how it works. There's like a saying that we used to kind of reverberate a lot at uni. It was like typography is like 70% of graphic design. Once you understand typography and how to lay things out with words, everything else becomes much easier. So yeah, I would say that there was a big shift between my kind of what I wanted to do when I started university and where I ended up. Um, yeah, it was fun though.
Interesting what you say about like, yeah, the reality of the traditional or sort of slightly off the mark training for what you wanted and what you need in that moment. Like I remember that with university and music. I think it's a pretty universal experience for many musicians. It's like going to study music and then being like, oh, I'm like doing all these things that feel like a distraction, or like perhaps it's just like a traditional archaic sort of thing that's been in a department for like however long. But
Yeah.
I really resonate with that.
But I guess that's really the point. And they kept saying like, try a whole bunch of things, experiment, find yourself. And all within the realms of design, obviously. But I think it was brilliant. Like I found what I liked and what I didn't like. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about university. Um, was just giving everything a go. Do I like these kind of people? Do I get along more with these kind of people? Do I like this kind of work? Is it giving me joy? Is it satisfying? And then after the 4 years is done, you're 40 grand in debt, and you're thinking, okay, shit, like at least I kind of know um what I might want to do after university. I was honestly really one of the lucky ones that I actually continued being a designer. I would say maybe 60% of the people I know from uni like just did something completely different. Um, so I guess there's like a real kind of gratitude there. But yeah, it's a real kind of just self-discovery phase, I'd say, university. And I often think like I've got a 2.5-year-old son, and I think would I want him to go to university? And I would 100% say yes, but for different reasons, maybe. Um,
Say more.
I, I think I would
Just
encourage him
because
to
you want him
go.
out of the house, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, who knows? That's going to be in the future. Maybe kids just never leave the home. But I think it's really just to challenge yourself. And I think put yourself in situations where you are quite sort of uncomfortable, and I guess that's where you do your growth. But definitely as a designer, I think you learn that design is so much just about people, and your ability to communicate with people is so just so crucial to getting hired, to be able to talk about your work. And I always like I always loved that, being able to just talk forever about design. We used to do this quite nerdy thing. Would be at parties and we've had a couple of beers and stuff, and would form these little kind of like these little design circle chats, and it was just like this lovely kind of guilty pleasure. Um, and it would be the latest fonts or whatever. At the time, I think it was Bebas New was taking the world by storm. Then there was like not Proxima Nova, but those kind of fonts. And it was just so fun because it was like we all sort of in that moment sort of felt like we'd found our tribe. It was just like such a cool feeling that we're drinking beers and talking about type, and it was brilliant, honestly.
You ever get kicked out of any parties because of design
No, I
taste?
mean these were designed parties. I think
Oh,
it
I
was quite
see.
cool because
You weren't like the weirdos in the corner being like, "You did
no, no,
it."
no, no. We probably I remember someone said to me, um, he's like, we almost become like the cool guys. Like we were all a little bit sort of on the outskirts, I guess, at high school. But um, if you're really good at like design and your fonts and stuff, like uh, switches are what people deem as kind of cool and successful. Um, but anyway, no, we were probably just a bit boozed, to be honest. But yeah, it was good. Honestly, I absolutely loved uni. If I could do it again, and I would, but it wouldn't be the same. It's about the growth.
Sure, yeah, it'd be awkward. Everyone would be like, "Who's this old guy?"
Yeah, we had a few old guys in the class, and they probably weren't even that old in hindsight. They're probably younger than me now.
I was one of those guys. I was technically a mature student, so I like took a gap year, tried a uni, didn't work out, took another gap year. So I was 21, which is just on the cusp of being
Yeah.
so I had this like induction with like mature students. I had all these like 40-year-olds and me, and it was like very weird.
It's funny how you're just deemed a mature student. What were you? What, 3 years or 4 years over the hump? But yeah, that's cool. Yeah. I love that about you. You're so um, I don't know. That I would say that I'm inspired personally by your self growth and your mission to really kind of grow. So I think it's great. Yeah.
Cheers, man. Thanks. Well, talking is inspiring, there was something you said there which really inspired me about that, like the satisfaction of simple things within your craft and how that helped you find your direction. Um, and I just wanted to go back to that, like the feeling that you had in those early years of being like, oh, I actually like doing this. I like laying, I forget what you said, like laying the car or whatever by the text or the illustration, and like feeling almost the physical relationship of things on the page, and then the deep world, endlessly deep world of typography that most people aren't like consciously aware of, but we're all like deeply connected to. I'd love you to talk to that a little bit, because that's really like the heart of design, isn't it? Really, I mean, graphic design, visual communication is like all of these small little things. I'm not talking about the tips and the techniques and the like border radius stuff. I'm talking about like how you develop over the years that sensitivity and refine it and make it more conscious, both of layout and typography. So perhaps any reflections that you have on that, and then maybe just like a TLDR for people who've never thought about typography, and like why it's so important, how it communicates so much, and whether we even know why it communicates so much. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I think in terms of going back to kind of where it kind of came from and maybe that sensibility, like I've always considered myself very lucky to grow up in a architecturally designed home. My dad's an architect, um, and from basically day dot, we would be exposed to designed objects. Dad was always very passionate about things like knives and forks and cutlery. Sorry. Um, glasses and stuff in the kitchen, or it could be, light fittings or posters or pieces of art in the house. So I think subconsciously this kind of relation to form, I guess it has been around for a really long time, and I think realistically it's like maybe it could be like sort of learning a language, just basically being exposed to this sort of thing. um so I think really like it was only kind of at university where I realized like I could look at this and actually be able to analyze it through a kind of a design lens. But at the end of the day, like a lot of it just comes down to feeling. And I think that I consider myself super lucky that I had that exposure from a young age. But I think anyone that's wanting to perhaps kind of really understand or kind of train, I guess, that kind of eye, it's just to almost feed yourself like a large language model would. It's just try and digest as much as you can. And I think that for me was quite easy because I think that for some reason I would look at something, and if it felt right, it would make me feel good. And I think design is just so emotional. It's just like it's almost this emotional, intangible thing of like why this font would work with that shape, or why that why this arrangement might work. And I guess there's theories to say that it's it mimics nature, or there's like the Fibonacci golden spiral sequence, Half-Life 3 confirmed or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, it's just like what feels right. And I've seen a lot of design agencies use this line of design that feels right. And I think that that really resonates with me. It's like something it's intangible, but um, I think you sort of find that what feels right um, to one person more often than not kind of feels right for another person. I think that like design really like good design, it's sort of it works for the masses. For me, sorry if I'm going off topic here, but sort of
You're not. This is
I love,
perfect.
I love talking about design. My partner gives me a lot of shit for it, but I'm reading I've just finished reading a really great book by Bruno Munari, called Design as Art, and it was written about in the 70s, I think. So it's a really old book, but it's become like the seminal piece. So I wasn't aware of it. Um, and essentially talks about like the artist and the designer. Um, and I think this was back in the day where like there's obviously no digital designers, no motion designers really. It was really graphic design, but a lot of the graphic designers were people who understood printing presses. It was more technical based. But the point of the book really was to the way of like using aesthetic sensibilities with good planning sort of resulted in good design. Um, and I think that this sort of is something that it just sort of really resonated with me, because I feel like I lean a little bit more on the artistic side of things. Um, Whereas someone like Tristan, he's just a really good sort of planner, and I think that's maybe how we split. He's sort of more into product, and I'm more into visual. But yeah, I think it's sort of how I see it personally. But yeah,
Mm. Yeah, there's loads of interesting things in there, and I definitely want to come back to designer's art because I know that's like really important for you at the moment. Couple of things that you could draw on there. Like, I guess one is like just that thing that you said about like if you want to get good at design, then ingest loads of content. And I've often thought about that with music as well. And also, there's this other piece there about like how you receive it and like how you actually it lands on you. So an aside little story that will hopefully illustrate this. Like there are so many times in my life where I've like been listening to music and I've been like, and it doesn't matter who it is. It's like could be like the best musicians or composers in the world, and like that zone I'm in is not receptive to the thing. Call it whatever you want, like sensitivity, openness, like regulation or whatever. And there's this weird thing I think that like you have as an artist or as a creator sometimes is you have a particular like a wide open receptor in a particular area. Um, and I don't really have a core question here. Do you notice that in yourself? Do you notice that like you're sensitive or
yeah,
oversensitive, like in a number of areas, or is it just in that area? Can you control that? And also, does it ever shut off? Do you ever like look at any piece of fucking design in the world and you're like shit, shit, shit? Like, do you ever get in those zones? You know?
yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think designers naturally are very sensitive. Um, I think that I grew up, my mum was more of the kind of pragmatic, work really hard, kind of like crack on, like get on with it. My dad was much more, he was an architect, he was more artistic, he was more sensitive. So I guess like I grew up with quite a sensitive dad, I guess by his generation standard for sure. And I think that it's totally right. I think it's letting yourself be moved by things in a way. I often say to my partner, like, I don't cry at a lot of things. But when I watch a movie with beautiful cinematography and the music, it just it just hits me. I think that I the stuff it's just really moved me. And I think I remember reading on Reddit, they said like when they were a teenager, this was some anonymous poster, but they said when they were a teenager, they could listen to music and they would get this feeling, almost like this nice drug feeling of like their whole body would get sort of chills. Um, and I think that they then said that as an adult they lost it. Um, and it's really fascinating because I feel like I never lost it. Like I'll still see visual stuff, beautiful art, and I'll get like this kind of goosebumpy feeling. Um, but I guess like as you say, yeah, I think it's just remaining sensitive to the world and being like letting it move you. It's something that wasn't that Picasso that was saying that like um, ever like great artists just spend all their time trying to draw like a child, and like it's something that just becomes harder and harder as you get older. Keeping that, not to sound sort of, new age or bullshitty, but it's like keeping this kind of this childlike feeling going, and this curiosity and this kind of vulnerability. And I think the minute you kind of like make that concrete and draw a box around it, I think you lose your like sensibilities. But yeah, I would describe myself as a pretty sensitive dude. And I think going back to at university, it was this finding your tribe. I think it was finding other people that were kind of sensitive to the world, and it was awesome. And I think kind of growing up in New Zealand, like it's kind of like a hard macho kind of society, I guess. Um, I think that where I grew up in Wellington, it was kind of the more arty city, and I liked that. Um, and I think that um, yeah, being able to really lean into the kind of arty, kind of sort of weird side of things was kind of quite liberating for me. I know we had a conversation um, about Flight of the Conchords, and you found it refreshing because it was like there was these two dudes who were kind of a bit weird and a bit kind of muso-ish, and all of a sudden they were from New Zealand, and there was this beauty in like their kind of silliness or kind of childlikeness, and that kind of stuck with me actually, and I think that for me is brilliant. Like that's what I look up to. Like, I'm really inspired by this kind of like this sort of, even if it's a designer or a musician or an artist that's like so comfortable in themselves, they're just so cool to me. Like
Are you
it's
talking about vulnerability here, or is that like a reductive kind of way
Yeah,
of looking at it?
vulnerable, but just like so comfortable in being sensitive, I guess. Um, and it's crazy, like they're so comfortable in it that they almost become not insensitive, but it's like they're so at ease with it. I think that's sick. Something I kind of aspire to be.
I kind of have this like imperfect phrase for this, which I always use, which is like refined awkwardness.
Mm,
And you see so often, I certainly feel in my journey, like as I've sort of liked myself more over the years, is it's like the very thing that was so like, "Oh, I don't like that about myself," and like felt like awkward,
mm.
has become the thing that sort of allows me to do what I do and more refined, you know. And more than looking at it myself, you see it in people all the time. Like when you look at what makes someone like really interesting and stand out in what they do, very often I think it's probably stems from like a period where that was like uh, an Achilles heel or something
Yeah,
like that, you
yep.
know.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
I guess
I agree with that totally.
I have a question then about you and your journey, which is like, it sounds like you're a pretty well balanced person, and that the way that sensitivity has lived in your life has actually been pretty healthy. Like you've welcomed it, um, and that's allowed you to be that part of the 30% or wherever it is of the people who actually went on and did it. But have there been periods in your life that have been periods where you really haven't, like you've kind of lost touch with it, or like you just don't really know what you're doing anymore? Or has that actually been a pretty solid like feature of your life? Have you always been able to like work in design or artistically, or is it ever sort of atrophied for a bit?
That's really interesting. I think that it, honestly, like from the moment that I found out that I liked, um, I guess art in general. This even goes back to way before university. Just putting things down on a page and drawing or that kind of thing. I would say that it's always given me like a sense of purpose, and it's something that I knew I was good at. And I think that because I formed that emotional kind of connection to doing things visually creatively, it's something that it's become core to my personality. And there's never been a time really that I've disliked it or been annoyed with it. I've just always found it, I just find myself so I f- yeah, I think I'm just so lucky that I've got this thing, this force in my life that like gives me pleasure.
And it's also a lens through which you can understand the world, like, because the world, you can look at it in any way you like, but presumably that's a huge part of your lens.
Yeah, yeah, like 100%. And I think I remember having a discussion about this word. Sorry, not to go back to sensitivity too much, but um, this discussion, and it was okay. So I'm sensitive, and is that a bad thing? And I was like, actually, not really, because I think sometimes people can view kind of sensitivity as a negative. It's pretty common, this kind of masculine journey that a lot of men are kind of on. But my description of sensitivity is like 90% positive. It's been the fuel, as you say, it's been the fuel for me, and kind of like an anchor for me, really, to kind of to enjoy art, to enjoy my job, to earn a living, to have something I can always go back to. It's like it's a rock. It's I I I think there were people at uni that maybe sort of didn't maybe have that kind of I don't know if it's like a self-doubt, or it's like a they didn't have that fuel, I don't think. And when you do good design, I guess you get validation. That's for real. Um, but I guess you're giving something to someone else. It's like it's mutually beneficial. It makes me feel good because I've done this cool little thing that's hopefully solving a problem, and then they get something that they can own, and they love too. So it's like a win-win, and it's like the cycle that it just permeates. I think good design work is like the designer loves to do it, and people love getting it, and it's just a lovely profession to have. I mean, I think designers, like, they love their job, and I think that's why this AI stuff is like kind of be a bit scary. But I think it's just we'll talk about that later. Um, but yeah,
Or
it's
not.
yeah,
Yeah, we probably will, but like, yeah, it's a funny one at the moment, isn't it? Yeah, dude, I mean, it's so inspiring. Like, it feels like it's, I don't know how to put it. Like, you're lucky. You in many ways, like, and it's
so
so wonderful that like that sensitivity can be a thing that's in you from the start, that like it just gets met by the world and you meet the world, and that the process is good, and it's just great. There's none of that tortured artist vibe, or like,
yeah,
yeah,
but
be practical or
well,
whatever.
yeah,
It's great. But I
that's
had I had a question about
yeah,
that, which
right.
is about like uh yeah, Tristan mentioned something like that. Like, you have that wonderful balance of like absolutely not being a tortured artist, but also continually trying to find the freshness and the newness in what you do. And so I have a kind of twofold question here, which is really about like how you approach developing your craft, and how you always have over the years. Like, you're continually working on it, you're continually trying to like take Glide's brand in a new direction, and then how that interfaces with like staying aware of what the zeitgeist is in design, and without having, and not like uh just following a trend and like implementing that trend, but always trying to, one, develop your craft, and two, like find a spin or an authentic spin on what is next in design. Because we could talk about that for hours, but I'd love just some open reflection on that.
Yeah. So I think staying fresh, I would say that's probably become more apparent in my 30s. I don't know if you call it a midlife crisis or whatever, but I think, this idea of uh full disclosure, I'm not having a midlife crisis, but I'm having one right now on the phone. Um, I think that um trends, I guess, are a really interesting one. I think trends are trends for a reason. I think trends are very valuable, and I think trends are used well, extremely important to designers, um, because I think that you're able, using a trend and using like a style that people understand. You're able to package information in a way which is digestible, like, immediately. like if you're trying to reinvent the wheel for every piece of work you're doing, you're going to burn yourself out, and it's not going to be efficient. So I guess the question then becomes like, how do you use a trend in a way which isn't repetitive or boring, or and I honestly think the recipe to that is like, I'm not going to put percentages on it, but it's a little bit of going on online and finding some nice kind of visual pieces that inspire you. And it's a little mixture of maybe something you saw on the weekend. I live in central London, basically. So I feel very inspired by just loads of visual material around me, like whether it's like a new cafe is opened, or um, there might just be, I don't know, someone's got some really sick shoes or something that just inspire me. So it's a really just like the so to go back to that, so there was a mixture of, found things that intentionally online, a mixture of kind of like unscripted, just inspiration from like your environment, um, but I- and then I would say a kind of a healthy blend of those kind of things. It has to be served in a way which is like 2% different. But that 2% difference, I guess, is the special sauce that's so hard to crack. And if you're doing a project and you've got a 1 day turnaround, um, it's really that this is the challenge: is doing something that's familiar, maybe on trend, feels fresh, and is clear. And I think that's like the sweet spot. But um, I think that that stuff sort of flows naturally. Like I would say you tend to do work that's trendy if you live in a trendy environment and you're inspired by trends, and you're inspired by modern, design. It's tricky though, because you don't want to like force it too hard because it's very obvious. You can see when people like they delete half their Instagram because it wasn't trendy enough, and then they start a new one with the new trend. And like I guess it's not really the right approach on it, I feel. Um, but
How do you feel about what's your relationship to your past work on that note? Like, you know, I doubt very much you're like the sort of person who looks back with any kind of shame or distaste on old stuff. You just sort of expect it to happen.
no, 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 I'm ashamed.
Okay.
I'm
All right.
ashamed. No, I mean not like in a serious, I have shame, but
It's stuff. I mean, like I've watched you develop Glides brand over the last 4 years or whatever it is. And like what said, you shared something with me the other day, and I shared something with you, and we were like, oh my god, that's like when you look at stuff visually, it feels like that was 44 years ago, Tom. Like,
I think that the shame would be if I would still design like that today. I think that um the shame would be knowing that I hadn't grown since that piece of
but
work.
isn't that just why is that just to like ask, be devil's advocate? Is that not what else? What is that if it's not just style? So like the style is old because we moved on from it, but is that the only thing that you're feeling then, or is it actually like your approach to designing a thing? Because back then, like for example, for this example, Glide was like a lot more. The brand was like more associated with fun, ease, simplicity. Now it's much more business focused, things like that. Like that's obvious. It shouldn't be business focused back then, and it should be now. Is there something beyond that when you look back? Can you like look at that and be like, oh, there are elements there that I was really not considering in design that I've grown into now?
Think the all the choices that seem a little bit kind of cringy, or they didn't age well, were choices that, as you said, were stylistic choices. Um, I think that you need to be careful that you're not a stylist. A stylist and a designer are different things. A
Mm.
stylist is looking at current trends and just taking something and just slapping the style on it. I think the stuff for me that didn't have that cringe factor, or don't feel like that they've aged, when there was like a real design problem, and we or like a really interesting business, and we chose more traditional design approaches to make it fresh. So that would have been, I don't know, like typography or photography, or things that have been around since the 70s, for instance. Like I would say that I like making timeless design is actually honestly relatively easy. I would say it's not using things that um uh it's kind of, I guess it's kind of hard to say, but um I think your work's going to age very, very quickly if you focus too much on the styling side of things. Um, yeah, and I would say perhaps some of the earlier stuff we did for Glide that I felt like really didn't age well, obviously, regardless of how the business has changed, are the things where like I kind of just need something to look cool on the page, you know? And that's the stuff, you know, like these kind of like 3D shapes, which, funnily enough, we can't seem to get rid of at Glide. They still exist in like code bases somewhere, but it's the thing that you just sort of plonked on the page to go, okay, let's lift this. Does it look cool now? Yes, it looks a bit cool. Ship it. That's the stuff that's got a really short shelf life, and I guess that's when I was joking about being a little bit ashamed. I think those are all those little moments where I look back and think, damn, like that probably wasn't the best design decision, and they didn't age super well. Um,
Also, there's a priority. You know, you're moving fast. That project's been allocated only a certain amount of time, and then you're on to something else. So to be fair as
mm.
well. Um, so what ages well in design? Like what causes something to age well?
It's got to be like authenticity. Um,
Great, I know exactly what you're talking about. We can move.
yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. Like, I love speaking in these like nebulous terms.
I mean, but you can't avoid it, which is why I find this stuff interesting and why
So
I like asking questions about it.
I mean, authenticity is like, you know, so like it's the things you study at university. So like, you know, back those VW ads come to mind when they were like, they had like a picture of a car and they said like lemon, and it just described all the things that were like wrong with the car. But it was basically like this hot take. Um, and I think that if you're in this world of like sameness and you come out with this really interesting, fresh, hot take, it almost becomes design history and it lasts, it just sticks around for ages. So like, you know, like Apple did this a lot, you know, with like I guess the Think Different campaign. You know, was it not Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali, you know, and I think so I guess those age well from like a creative perspective, but I think it's actually really hard to think about aging at the moment in design. It's honestly not something I think about when I'm working. I don't think about like what is this going to look like in a couple of years because things just change so fast.
Yeah,
And we all that's one of the things which is like a little bit of a downer sometimes in web design is that, you know, your work is quite ephemeral. It's not going to live in the world that long. I mean, you'll be able to go back on like the Wayback Machine and see your kind of work in the past, but you know, we might be changing our homepage 4 times a year, maybe more. Um, and I think that's a tricky thing to kind of grapple with. Um, So I guess like timelessness is it's a I don't know, maybe it's a dying concept really. Maybe timelessness, it just feels like the cycle of life and the cycle of the world just changes so frequently now that um it's irrelevant almost in a lot of ways, timelessness. I don't know.
yeah.
It's just not
Or
enough.
is it because I feel exactly the same? Or is it because we're like so deeply in the world of tech that like we're following that cadence? So much of our lives is following that cadence, which is speeding up. But when you go back to the seasons and the world and
Yeah.
normal human life, and like there's some stuff that's more perennial.
So that's interesting. So I think that different um different like designers design different things in terms of their weight, like how like I mean physically, obviously people might design like furniture, which is like a heavy real object that was going to sit in a house for a long period of time. I think that is it's almost like a timeless object. Like physically it's going to be around for a long time. um I think things like furniture and interior design to an extent can be maybe not so much interior design, but product design for me is something. Timelessness is an important thing, but um, I guess the fact that we timelessness is almost like, not to get stuck on this, but the more I think about it, the more I think it's almost a negative. Like if you can't change your brand every 6 months or so, like that's probably a bad thing. Like having a fixed, rigid thing that doesn't evolve as time progresses. Um, yeah, I don't know if that's good anymore. I think branding in general is like it's it's like anti-timeless. I was really inspired by a talk. I think I pronounced his name's Phi, from Perplexity. Um, and he was talking about this way of thinking about brand, which is not following the traditional way of creating a really fixed brand guidelines that doesn't change, which is like about strict kind of um, control and like regularity. But he was thinking about branding as a much more emotional state. They were thinking of picking a word which elicits an emotional response and building your branding material around that. And that for me was really inspiring and refreshing. It was like kind of throwing out the book of 50 years of graphic design where you wanted everything to be the same. Um, but this was like, it was like seasonal, as you put it. It's like, maybe each quarter your business has a different mission, so maybe you do a slight different take on what that emotion might be. There's definitely still consistency in what that emotion is, but there's different takes on it. um
But surely underneath that, for a brand, there still needs to just be an unconscious. You might have that on the surfaces of the for the directive of the designers there, but they're all unconsciously like sort of sharing a wordless shared language. Like someone's not going to like just like grab pink glitter and like sparkles and be like, I'll throw it onto the Bank of England like because I'm following this emotional thing. Surely it
yeah, no,
ties.
no, no, you're right, and I think that's
Isn't it just a shortcut for like to help your brain? Like my mum wrote this book, which the subtitle was like the art and science of blah blah blah. What it was about voice work, and she wrote it when I was really little, and it's always been in my brain, this idea of like marrying art and science. And the example she would always give would be like, she worked in clinical settings as well as at like drama school and like with the Royal Shakespeare Company and things like that. And so she had this background where, like, depending on the moment, she would say, like, oh, like your, name a muscle or whatever, or explain, this is happening like this, blah, blah, blah. Or she'd be like, imagine a ball falling to the bottom of your stomach and feel some string pulling your feet down to the floor. And that would like elicit a much more holistic sort of response in an actor or whatever, rather than being like, bah, 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 bah.
Yeah,
And is that not just one of those things for experienced designers,
yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I would say that I have the luxury of being able to use a kind of rough, vague emotion to do design work. I think someone coming in, if they only had that one single emotional directive, you wouldn't be able to produce any more work. Like you need to look at the body of what's been done and then assimilate and then kind of produce more work. But I think that goes back to my point. It's like you when you build this like the structure of like, okay, these are the 6 colors you can use, this is the kind of pattern you want, this is the photography style, it's just so mechanical and repetitive. This is actually one of my big beefs with design agencies. So I've worked at design agencies before, and I've worked now with Glide. So what my big issue is, so you'll get a really talented team of like motion designers, graphic designers, brand strategists, etc. With a creative director. You spend quite a lot of money to make this beautiful brand. It's got a logo, it's got motion principles, it's got, basically a beautiful way done by designers. This lovely artifact that gets passed on to the startup or whatever the business is. And then you go, okay, cool. What next? Like you can't, because you don't have the designers of that level. You can't. you can't keep doing work on that level. You can't continue it in a way. It's kind of it's like almost like a fallacy. And then I've been on the design side where people go, oh yeah, we gave the brand strategy to the client, and then they pissed, like they messed it all up. Don't know if we can swear in this one. They
Go for it, mate.
they
Keep it coming.
failed to implement the brand guidelines, and
All
it's
the 12-year-olds just left the chat.
yeah, it's like no shit. I mean, like it's this is the thing. Like it's this like design kind of arrogance, I guess. It's like you're designing for people that need to use this stuff every day. They like your beautiful direction. Like yeah, it might last like 3 weeks, and then they've burnt through all the assets. But what next? But I guess this is the thing. Like this is why it's always really, really hard. It's like you need to set businesses up for success, but really what that is coming to work every week and interpreting the brand in a slightly different way as each project kind of comes in, and it's ongoing, you know. Um, and it's yeah, it's kind of interesting in that regard. But I think things like logos and stuff, are they even timeless anymore? I mean, you know, I feel like rebrands just get like tossed around, you know, left, right, and center. Um, Interesting one. I don't know.
So related to all this slightly is something you spoke about earlier, which is about communication and like articulating. Um, and like what you were just saying there about agencies, they come in, they talk, they understand, they question, there's back and forth, everyone's talking in words, and then slowly there's explorations here and there, everyone's still talking in words about design, and then you go to the wordless realm of design and back to the words. And there's this seems to be like this intimate relationship between like words or concepts and ideas
Mm.
and then the actual thing that gets done, and everyone's sort of agreeing there, and then they're also agreeing here. And you said something about like you enjoyed the aspect of like communicating about it or describing it early on, and you recognize that and you love that act. I just again, not a clear question here, but like, do you ever think about that, like how imperfect language can be sometimes to talk about design, or is it
Yes.
do you ever feel like it's not imperfect and actually you can really articulate things? And then another thing is like, what this makes me think of is like when I was in university and people talked about defending your composition, defending your music, like, which I hated, really
Mm.
hated so much. I was like, no man, I just want to write what I want to feel. But people would be like, no, you need to contextualize this in history and explain like blah 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 blah, which I never did, probably because I couldn't. But like, I also think there's an issue with it. So yeah, random long non-question there,
Yeah,
but
no,
do you
no,
have
no.
any thoughts on that?
There's two things that I'll try to answer there. But so the first one, I think this relationship to speaking or writing a design is a really important one. I think that when you're trying to talk about design, it's really helpful to put it in a story. I always find one of the most like enlightening moments of doing branding work is putting everything into a presentation. So you've got this crazy board of ideas and inspiration and crazy scribbles and all this kind of stuff. The only why that actually gets turned into design for me is when it's put in a presentation and it's like, this means this because of this. There's definitely like rationalization that you add at the end, but that's sort of all part of the process. And then what I'll do is I'll sit down and I will literally start speaking to myself, like chattering to myself. It alarms a lot of people around me, and I have to explain that I'm not going completely mad. But
It says rocking back and forward.
yeah, yeah. Um, Talking about your work is really interesting. But to your second point of defending your ideas, I think that's kind of for me counterintuitive. I've got a friend. I'm obviously not going to call him out here, but he's the kind of guy that will really go into loads and loads of detail about explaining why, and he's a great debater. So he'll have a point and he'd kick your ass in a debate, and the debater would go, okay, you're right, this is good, this is what we should do. But at the end of the day, like, the point that people are pushing back on stuff is that's where the message is. It's like, well, okay, well, you know, if you separate yourself from your work, well then, it's not
That's
invalid.
such a good point. Yeah, such a good point about our world as well, because it's run in words. Like so
Yeah.
much of it is random words. I felt like that about I mean, this is sound like a victimhood story. It's absolutely not. I mean, it is in some ways, but my old boss was just like, what, 7 or 8 years ago now, was just exactly that character. Just like a complete muppet, like made terrible decisions, but was so articulate and a bit scary as well, and totally ran his business like in a terrible way for everyone. And yet, like, you could never communicate. It's weird.
I think really that's in some ways the role of a creative director, and that's why I think they get a lot of they get a lot of shit, because at the end of the day, it's their ability to kind of to bullshit, to take things and develop um a kind of argument that makes it difficult to say why you don't like something. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, like when you put your work out there, like it's there's a real act in separating your personal identity with your work. You put it out in the world and you just attack it. You try and tear it down. You try and find all the holes of it. Like you kind of that's why I think a lot of designers, they can come across as quite cynical and critical. But that process of critiquing and just really ripping your work to shreds is like then what's left is probably really good. Um, and I think that, yeah, growing up, like we were, my family, like my dad is such a critical guy. Um, but I think it's learning to kind of like see the positive in that. Um, but yeah, it's really about like design is kind of what's left over in a way. And I guess that's this whole sense of minimalism and reduction, which is something we're trying to do a lot in Glide at the moment, is um, really just trying to kind of strip away all the kind of bullshit, the slop, to use an AI term, the stuff that's kind of it was just easy, that was sort of put on the page to look kind of cool, but maybe it's not that useful. Um, and then that gives you time to really focus on the craft, which would be, making sure the typography is great, or and really investing in, things that you do. It's like the footage photography, and when that stuff sings, then like your work is just so much better. But um yeah, it's kind of it's stripping away that kind of that sort of fluff, or yeah. I think part of the thing, just going back to the thing about putting kind of context around your work, it's like it's it's making it so you can talk about your work in a way which feels kind of compelling and a little bit more airtight. I think it's just a really helpful kind of thing to do. I was thinking before a little bit about the process, and particularly the way I kind of look at things. Um, if that's helpful to kind of go on now, I don't know if this is kind of digressing.
Yeah, please.
So I would say I was thinking about this, and what I would probably do is usually break it down into three components. Three is obviously just an easy number to remember, but sort of puts into a nice, I don't know, the Holy Trinity. Let's put it like that. So the first, so
Trinity. I'll put it on the at the opening of the episode. Great.
the first one I would say is it's context. So this kind of leans into this thing of like is there a well written brief around the design task? Um, what really I think you need before you start a design project is you need the stuff, you need the ingredients, you need where it's going to live. You just need to kind of do like a world building exercise around the the project. So it's kind of it's imagining what lives around this, kind of where it lives. So for example, let's take we have a thing at Guide called the front desk, and that's essentially it's an above the fold section on our marketing site, which we update for logged in users. So there's a hero card and there's two sub cards. So earlier on, I was designing a visual for one of the new product features, which is coming out, which is um, a upgrade to our kind of voice transcribing feature component. So the first thing I'd do is like, okay, so where is this thing going to live? So it's going to live in the front desk. Um, what words do I have to play with? So I kind of dug through the kind of the task, and I found that someone had kindly put a Loom recording of the feature and how that all sort of worked. Um, Then Reese, our product marketer, had put some kind of copy together. So you're starting to kind of like basically just get all the elements you're working with. So this is, you're gathering everything up, you're building the kind of context. I think the next thing, once you've got all the ingredients there, is this sort of senses of empathy. So you're learning about who's interacting with it, um, what emotions they should feel, what do we need to tell them, what are we communicating. So it's really just trying to imagine that you're seeing this as a non-designer, um, and kind of what you're going to get out of it. And I think this is where the sort of like brand comes into it a lot, like brand strategy. It's about sort of connecting, I guess, with the person who's using it. And then I would say the final thing is the execution stage. And I think this is the thing that myself as a junior designer, a lot of junior designers, they just jump forward to the execution stage. They go, okay, let's make it look like this, or I saw this cool style that we can apply to it. Um, so really, like the execution bit for me is like one of the last things you do, which is almost a bit of a cliche in design where now it's kind of obvious. But it's really then figuring out things like how long it's going to take, um, what, like if it's an hour, if it's a 3 hour task, or it's a day or a week or whatever. Um, it's, starting to look for kind of visual inspiration. Maybe there's something you saw earlier on, but it's really just focused on actually producing the element, well, like the item. I think that gets quicker as you get more senior. You can do the execution stuff really easy. Obviously, with new tools and stuff, there's like a smorgasbord of ways of bringing things to life, whether it's motion or static imagery. But I would say like that would be how I describe approaching a task. I've probably left out something major, but it's
That's
fine.
great. No, it's really useful to hear. Do you ever, something struck me that was maybe related, maybe off the wall, but like, do you ever design just for yourself?
Yeah. Oh, actually, do I design for myself, or is it because I want to post it online for other people? Um, shit, that's a really good
Put it
question.
this way, when was the last time, or can you imagine yourself like designing something and never showing it to anyone?
You know what? I think the last thing I probably designed for myself, or maybe myself and my partner and family, is the like a kitchen renovation. So we were trying to develop like a system of where the bin should go, where the fridge should go, like where to pull out kind of larder, pantry kind of thing. Um,
But that's still functional.
yeah, I mean,
Like that's for other people. I mean, like open up a Figma file and then delete it or shelve it, and no one will ever see it or whatever.
but for me,
Like
that's not design. That's art. Like
oh, interesting. Okay,
design is for other people. I would say
okay,
going
great.
back to growing up and this kind of validation thing. It's like you did something for someone else. It's like, not to sound like bloody Mother Teresa, but it's like it's a
You
sense.
always sound like Mother Teresa, Tom. Stop
Yeah,
it.
yeah, 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 yeah. That's what they call me. Um, but it's a sense. Apparently, she wasn't a very nice person, but
Okay, let's
yeah.
shelve that part of the conversation.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's putting something out there for someone else. They can use it. You're happy because you made them happy. I guess I could describe myself as a people pleaser, but no, I do honestly think that that's the difference between art and design. Is like design, it's for the masses. It's like the aim is to be like, I guess this is the thing. It's not making really beautiful, expensive art that only a certain amount of people can interact with. It's trying to make something that any human can benefit from, I guess. Like I would say that if people aren't actually using it, is it design? Um,
Obviously there's no ultimate truth we're getting at here, but this is a really interesting like angle of like where for you, Tom, like art and design sort of shifts. So let's go back to the original question. When was the last time you did some art for yourself?
oh, that's
Or do you not do that?
I
That
used to
never
do it
been
I
really.
used to do it a lot more, but I guess um I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think it like I don't think I've ever really done art and design, well, I guess art even in for myself, I think I would have done it in the hopes of showing my dad or maybe showing people online or something. Um,
So does it have it? Does any of this visual communication and artistic stuff have meaning to you outside of? So you wouldn't. You're saying that it's absolutely integral with the way that it relates and helps and serves other people.
mm, yes, I would say I wouldn't be satisfied if it was just for me. But that could be a great angle that maybe I could explore is like, if it wasn't for anybody, what would it look like? Um, and I think, yeah, that's really interesting. I
And it's
like.
interesting to me, like just personally, that you haven't thought about that. Like you are so focused on, like, I don't know, serving or and helping or whatever. Like just today, I've sort of set up this experiment. So like anyone who's listened to this before knows that I used to work in music and don't anymore. But I definitely want to return to it, either work or play one day. And so I'm just trying to slowly like bring that muscle back a bit.
Yeah,
And I just did like my first post yesterday and another one this morning on a platform totally privately, nothing associated with my name or whatever. Um, just posting it. It wasn't great. Like it wasn't great again this morning, but like, but there's interest. It's interesting there because it's like, well, I'm posting it, so do I want people to like it? It's kind of like exploring, but I do think it's really interesting that that lens, like as musicians and people who produce music, there's so many, we tend to often have so many sketches that never see the light of day because it actually takes a certain amount more to produce and finalize a track, so many things end up on the shelf still. um, but that lens or that machinery that it has to go through to then go to be seen by people is a really useful one because it forces you to like actually like to make it different. I don't
yeah.
know, there's something interesting here.
No, it's I just had a thought. For me, when you share it with someone else and they like it or whatever, it feels like it's done. Like, when is something ever finished if it's just for yourself? Maybe finishing is something that, we're a bit obsessed about. Like, is it a task that we can cross off our list? And are there things um, that we can just work on knowing that they'll never be finished? Is that a little bit scary, you know? Um, but I think the idea of going back to, doing things without people seeing it, maybe it's a form of kind of compassion for yourself. It's doing something that you like and you're just owning it and you're not kind of sharing it with anything else. That could be like a great, therapy tool, for instance, is just doing art for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that part of why I'm doing this at the moment is it's like separating that thing that kind of was annoying back when I was younger with music, where it was just so tied up with self-worth
Mm,
compared to everything else that I do. Like my work, all my work at Glide, hardly any of it is like tied up with, well, of course it is, but in a healthy way, tied up with self-worth. You're like, if you do a bad job, you're like, oh, the thing I did wasn't good. I'll improve next time. Not like I'm a terrible person or whatever. Or like I'll never be good at this. So I'm kind of like trying to play with that and heal it and like and explore like what it means to write a piece of music and not have anyone be like, oh, that's Jack's. It can just be a piece of music that's out there.
yeah.
Um, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But you
That's
get a lot of value, I know, at Glide, and I remember offline you telling me like some of the origins of like when you got into design, like bringing art home to your parents and getting
mm,
that kind of like validation. But it's again, it seems like really healthy for you. It's not like a like this is important or like I need this sort of thing. But it's still really valuable, right?
yeah. And I think like there are some kind of comedians at Glide that you put some work out there and they'll say, this is effing shit or whatever. And I actually find that hilarious. Like, we used to always joke at university, um and we just joke to our friends and saying, yeah, start again. And I think there was a beautiful kind of liberation in that it was just like, it's just like, if your work's shit, it's probably because you're a bit foggy, or I think honestly, the for me, good work comes from not being a tortured artist or, you know, having pain. It comes from like waking up early, going for a workout, catching up with friends. I think you need to be in a good, happy place to be creative. Maybe this is why, like back in the day, Google invested so much in offices and they started, ping pong tables and, gyms and stuff at the workplace because, when you're happy, you do good work. And it's a beautiful like cycle because you do good work because you're happy, and you're happy because you do good work, and like that's the ultimate cycle you want to be on. Um, I feel like I've been on it for a long time, and I feel bloody grateful for it.
Hmm. So just taking it back to your training, that had like a fair amount of traditional design craft in it, and you could have come out of that and gone into like at the time, what was it, 2010 or something like that, like traditional design routes, like an agency, as you mentioned. But well, you did go into an agency, but it wasn't a traditional design agency. It was straight into web. And when I was chatting with Tristan about this, he said it wasn't like uncommon, but it wasn't like the done thing, you know. I'm just interested, was that a significant decision for you, and what made you go to like a web-based kind of agency?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say, in terms of the people I went to university with, I would say that only about 10 to 20% of the people actually ended up in more of a kind of a digital role after university. The majority of them did like advertising, or they went into like straight graphic design jobs, like setting up magazines and traditional stuff. I think for me, I felt that like the reason why I went into doing digital work was A, because there was money in it. There was work. Like people needed websites. This was before you could do your own website in Squarespace, or at least like a normal kind of non-technical person could build a website. This is way before that. I always said, I'm not sure I said it too, but it was something I used to always think at university. If I can't come out of university and I can't code a website, then I'm screwed. I felt that even back then. I think I've always had a slightly cautious attitude to new technology, in the sense that I can see it coming, so I need to get ahead of it as soon as I can. And I feel like I'm pretty stoked that I felt like I chose pretty well. Um, so I worked in a really small kind of boutique sort of web design company with a guy, Craig Christensen, who was actually one of my mentors going back. Um, and he would code pretty basic websites, but he'd do them really well. And he had this really cool little office in Wellington, with some cool art on the wall, and it was in a cool area of the city. And I just thought he was a really cool dude. And like people, his clients would come in, and he would just treat them like humans. He would really understand their kind of business problems. Um, and yeah, I just really looked up to him. I thought he was such a smooth guy, and the whole thing just seemed really, really smooth. Um, but I would be put into a position where I had to like code websites, and I honestly found it like one of the most stressful things I've ever done. Like the thing about development is that you can't just throw more time at something to fix the problem. There will be a logical thing that your brain has just missed, or you've left a backslash somewhere that you can't find, or something like that. With design, however, like the more time you put on something, usually it gets better because you can kind of figure out things a little bit easier. um, but weirdly at that time, I didn't know that you could just do the design aspect and you didn't have to build it. I think that was a relatively uncommon thought at the time, that you can just design in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever the tool was and just hand it off to a developer. Um, so knowing that those roles were separate, it kind of gave me a lot more confidence to do kind of cool, crazy stuff. They didn't have to worry so much about how it's executed. Developers probably hated me, I would say, after realizing that. And I, when I moved to London in 2013, I worked in a job where I didn't have to do any coding. No, sorry, that's not true. The first job I had, I was a freelancer, and they tried me out on some code, and I just freaked out. And I was like, I can't do this. I'm not doing this anymore. It's giving me anxiety. So like, I just said, look, I'm gonna make everything look beautiful. Um, and that was fine. Like there was a clear kind of definition, which then I took to my second role, and it's kind of served me well. And I realized that it's kind of a different mindset that design and engineers have. Um, it's kind of one is probably bound a lot more by what you can actually achieve technically, and the other one's a lot more like I guess the kind of visual design side of it is kind of looking at it through a different lens. And I guess that for me was a sign. Yeah, it was a success. I was actually stoked. I'm really happy that I went down the digital route. Um, and yeah, that's I look back on it as a good decision.
Do the restrictions of web, or like the development of the web of the last however long it is that you've been designing, does that play a role in the way that you think about stuff, or is it less conscious than that? Is it just too slow?
Yeah, for sure. And so that kind of if I fast forward a little bit to my career in London, so I worked at a ad agency designing kind of pretty bland websites, and then I had my first job, which I'd say was my first kind of proper step up into like the design world or maybe the design scene, was at a company called Neverbland. And so I'd worked at an agency which I thought was bland, and then I went to Neverbland. I was like, shit, this place is awesome. And it was just cool. There was cool people there. It went back to this thing of like, yeah, this is. I felt like kind of connected to the design scene, and like they were posting. At the time, it was really cool to have like dudes that looked like fishermen and covered in beards and stuff, and like they were making work that used assets with cool people. And I think that that then was, I guess, the um, the the time that I really felt that. Sorry, what was the question again? I forgot the.
It was about like the development of web, and like whether the restrictions as they've lifted, as the web is
Yeah,
like the
sorry, yeah,
technology has
that's
lifted. Yeah,
that's
that's fine. Don't worry.
the question.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, cool. So yeah, at Neverland, I had then started to experience what it was like to work with very good developers. So before that, I would kind of just do my kind of like fairly airy fairy design that looked cool, but maybe was quite hard to translate. But I remember working with a couple of developers there, and I'd send my work to them, and they'd like, they would critique it. They'd be like, "No, no, like you can't do this. This is good. Like, please, like revisit it. Blah blah blah." And I hadn't really had that before, um, and it really kind of made me start to think of things in more development terms. I guess there was always like an underlying, what's possible and what you can't do in HTML and CSS. But I think that when I was so close to really talented developers who would speak their mind and they would say when things weren't kosher, I really started to think, okay, well, maybe I need to change my process here. So what I would then do is instead of like designing crazy stuff, in Photoshop or whatever, and then just hand it off to them and say, "Can you do it?" I would change the process by going through and looking online at code that existed already and using it as a benchmark. Because if you give a developer a reference to something, um, it's much easier for them to see how it's going to be put together. Um, so I'm really close to a lot of developers that I worked with at Neverland, and strangely, I find actually I have more developer friends than I do designer friends. Strangely, um, I don't know if it's just like they're all a bit, I don't know, more kind of nerdy and awkward, but I guess designers are the same. I don't know. I'm generalizing a lot here, but I really started to kind of identify a lot with the how it was going to be put together. By the way, they've all had like crazy kind of career changes to do with sort of AI and no code and stuff. But um, yeah, I think having the restraint of what can and can't be done, and also learning to like look at benchmarks a lot more is a really helpful point in which my career changed, I'd say.
That's something that when I spoke with Tristan, I didn't really talk about enough. And I'd imagine for him, it's even more so, like the restrictions of product and based on design ideas that he has. Um, on that note, like, yeah, Tristan's head of, now VP of design at Glide, and you run brand and web. I forget what your title is. What is it again?
I forget it too, man. So
Brand and web design, basically.
Brandon Webb, that's what's on my portfolio. So
And
that's
it's an interesting, like you guys like encompass like all of design at Glide, basically, product and then the brand and facing stuff. Just interesting, like whether you have any reflections on like your choice early on to not go down the product design route, or maybe you did. I don't know. Like you met Tristan pretty early on. Like, was it just because he was specializing on that and then he advised you to do this, or like I don't know. How did
yeah.
that go? Like, did you ever decide to go and do product?
I did do a bit of product design at Neverland, and that did not go that well. There was a very complex product I was working on that was it was the time that GDPR was um, coming, and we had, a fixed timeline to get basically a GDPR compliance tool designed and ready to go. And everything was going well because we started with the website and the brand, and that was cool. And we had some cool ideas about illustration. This was back when kind of like corporate Memphis illustration was cool, and I loved that. But then we started to get into actually designing the product, and I honestly I struggled. Like I just didn't understand what the tool did. It was so complex, and that's why I view Tristan as a bit of a genius, because I think product designers, it's a different skill set. It's so it's much more understanding the complex workings of what the business is trying to do, and putting it on a page in a way which is kind of like user friendly. Um, that's then I think after that product project, I realized that like I wasn't a product designer. I can make things look beautiful. I could probably make um, well, I try to make things look beautiful, and they look like I could be a product designer, and I often get confused for a product designer, but um, it's not my skill set, and I kind of maybe I could lean into it a little bit more, but it's not really where I think my strengths lie, and I don't think it's that wise to keep seeking product design roles. Yeah.
Do you have any insights on like the journey of like a brand evolving from a product and a brand stamp point of view? Because I know that like we have conversations internally sometimes of like, oh, the brand's here, the product's here, uh, like this needs to catch up. We need to bring that across here, or like the colors aren't the same. Whatever it is, like
Yeah, it's funny because it's really hard to take my like design hat off, because um, there's a product recently that I thought had a really good brand. I won't name it, but I thought the brand was fantastic. I think it was done by like a really great branding agency in London. It's like Ragged Edge or something. And the brand was cool. The website was awesome. And then I got into the product and I was like, this is really shit. And I almost felt like kind of tricked in a way. Um, there's a kind of a real kind of like smoke and mirrorsy approach that I found that this particular product used. But I don't. It's hard to say whether your average person would have noticed that or cared. Um, maybe they did. I think people are getting a little bit more savvy with good product design these days. But I found it a little bit kind of disingenuous. Um, so I think going back to Glide, I think that because Tristan and I have such a close relationship inside and outside of work, um, that we try to make this really nice synchronicity between the brand and product. Um, so that might come down to really specific things like our corner radiusing. We had this big bold idea this year to go 4 pixel corner radiuses as opposed to 16, and funnily enough, like that actually is kind of aligning with this new, soon to be released kind of brand strategy work of being a little bit more kind of, sophisticated or luxurious. But the synchronicity, I think, is just really important, to kind of not kind of trick and dupe your users into buying something which had an amazing storefront and presented really, really well, and then using the thing. I think that they should really be on that same level. Tristan keeps joking that the product is out of sync with the brand, and I keep joking that I'm out of sync with him. But I think realistically, we're probably pretty good. We try to use the same like fonts for buttons and all this kind of stuff. We try to reuse as much of the kind of visuals that I'm working on. But I guess that comes down to mine and his relationship. Like that's how this works.
So, is there any like insights that you might be able to give designers about the way that you work, like from a systems point of view, like
Mm.
in Figma and things like that? Like, 'cause so much of this is both on one hand, just like that, like shared knowledge, like unconscious, like unspoken language stuff and references and shared history. Um, and then there's also a very systematic approach as well to this. And sometimes you can over optimize here and things like that.
Yeah. The systems thinking has only really been around since I've been at Glide, and that's because unlike an agency, you have to live in the work that you're making. You- You're building the house that you will then live in. So what I mean by that is like if you are, for example, designing a a blog cover, one of my first questions will be, go back to context, is like, how many of these things will there be? If there's one, then it can be much more sort of a standalone piece of art. But if there's 15, then you need to be like, okay, how is this going to scale? Is it going to be boring after the third post because you're only changing a small element? Are you changing enough? Did your brand system that you made, like in terms of the color palettes of Glide, does it factor in for like this? Are there enough shades of red or aqua in the Glide's case to account for these little mini systems? I would say that um, you only really figure that out by being at a product or working on one project for a long enough amount of time. I think I've been at Glide for 3 years and 11 months or something. Very specific. I think it was a LinkedIn update. But um, yeah, it's kind of learning when to apply the system and when to kind of just chill out and just do some, you know, beautiful looking ephemeral stuff. Like, for example, where you don't need a system is things like one-off sticker packs. We did a really cool summer merch box with a really talented designer, Lucy, and that was just like a beautiful one-off thing that we wanted to fill people with joy and make them feel like they were part of something really cool at Glide. Um, that did not need a system. So I think it kind of goes back to this thing of I saw a lovely it was a preview of a slide which is going to be spoken about at Figma, and the agency is called Smith and Diction. Um, and the slide said efficiency kills love, and this is something that's kind of an internal struggle working at a um, startup, is you need to ship fast and break shit and you know don't get precious and blah blah blah. But people can see when things have been rushed, and not just non-designers. Like, I like to think that's why people choose Glide, is that they can see that we've put love and craft into aspects at the company. Um, and y- you can't get too bogged down by efficiency, because yeah, it kills the love and passion that design should kind of instill in people. And it's a real tricky one, to be honest. It's really figuring out, yeah, when to apply the systems mindset and when to apply the love and beauty and the art of things. that's why I think it goes back to this thing of like, how long is this thing going to be around for? How many people are going to use it? How much time have I got on this project? There's only so much love you can put into a thing when you've got an hour to do it. You know what I mean? Um, but yeah,
Beautiful. Yeah. So one more intersection that I'm interested in is that of brand and visual identity, and then like strategy and business strategy or brand strategy. And your partner Cynthia is brand strategist, and like I know you guys have learned from each other a lot. Obviously, you must have learned a lot from each other over the years. Like, yeah, any I'm really copying out my questions today. I'm just starting everything with any reflections on this, but because I know we have a lot of shared conversations and shared history, so I know I can kind of say it. But like, yeah, like for designers, like how important is it to be involved deeply in strategy, and where's the dividing line between like brand strategy and like
yeah,
business strategy?
yeah. No, no. I mean, I remember reading an article by Aaron Poe. He's a creative director slash designer. I think he's at Hims now, the product. But he said one of his pro tips was to make friends with a brand strategist. And
You went one step further.
yeah, I went in. Yeah, now she's my partner. So that was honestly, I can't really overestimate, overestimate. I can't really. Yeah, I can't. I guess being with Cynthia and learning about the why of a brand has really, really like improved my work. I think especially because branding is just very nebulous. It's branding is like, people talk and talk about it, and people might think a brand is just the logo, and like, sometimes it is just the logo. Like who knows? Like who's to say? But being able to craft that story around your work, and kind of the reason why you choose certain emotions or personality traits, and how the brand is reflecting the uniqueness of the business. It's just, yeah, I guess really become quite ingrained in my work, and I do try to do it. It's very difficult. Um, like I find it difficult because there's all these quite kind of fundamental things you need to do to have a good brand strategy that I guess I don't know if it's laziness or I just haven't really endeavored to do it properly. But it's like it's this kind of interview phase, and it's going around and interviewing clients and interviewing people using Glide, in this case. But that really kind of like seeks to unravel all these like really core truths to the company. And Cynthia's like brilliance is, and she is brilliant. She's extremely good. Like she's worked for really like fantastic branding agencies around the world. I think her ability to take something which is quite nebulous and like a little bit messy, but just create a very single narrative around it, singular narrative, is just brilliant. And then, so for instance, what that might look like is like you're interviewing, you're uncovering why people choose Glide or why they chose it over another competitor, and really looking at the people in the company, and that's so important about making sure that your brand kind of reflects the people who use the product and people who make the product, and then distilling that down into like mission, and like brand traits and stuff like that. And it's honestly just it becomes like the most useful tool for a designer to then use that as a platform to start doing creative work on, because it's justified. You know, there's reasons why you're choosing this color. You can then like, you know, it's not necessarily defending your work personally, it's defending it based on the strategy which everyone had agreed upon. And the beauty of a brand strategy is it comes from people at the company. Like she'll quote people saying certain things or customers. So it's real. It's the most tangible, um, it's the most tangible thing you can have in the creative process. Um, yeah, anyway. Um, it's really, yeah, it's it's brilliant. It's just brand strategy is just invaluable to our work. Yeah. which is why we're putting so much emphasis on it at the moment, Nikolai.
Yeah. I'd really want to chat with Cynthia about stuff. So maybe you can put a good word and get her
Yeah.
on the podcast at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
she's sort of looking at alternative career paths, so
oh, interesting.
could be very
Okay.
interesting actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, so just wrapping up, and since we're reflecting all over the place, I might ask another reflection question, which is about this time as a designer that we're in. And like everyone, this seems to be like a feature of every episode almost. It's like everyone who's a creator at the moment is like wrestling with this kind of like semi identity crisis, or starting to be an identity crisis of like how you do what you do and where the value lies and how it changes as technology evolves. Just yeah, stepping right back at design and what you do, like how are you feeling about it and where it's going? Not necessarily where is it going, but like how do you feel like you're already changing, and how do you predict that it might change?
Um yeah, like if I said I wasn't uh bleeping my pants, I would be lying. I think that designers are on this kind of like this weird phase at the moment. You're like on one day you're excited about these tools and you're like, yeah, this is awesome, I can do all this cool stuff. And on the other hand, you're thinking, okay, this is actually scarily good and it's getting in a position where it can do things that I can do. And I guess I feel like quite bad for people that have been going through this the last couple of years. I'd say with 4.0, ChatGPT 4.0, that's been the closest that it's been like, shit, this is actually really good now. So then you go, okay, cool. What am I doing? Like, what's my game plan? What am I doing that at this stage, can't necessarily be done? Um, but I think that I don't know, like there is definitely a fear there of being replaced, and as much as you can kind of rationalize, it's not going to replace designers, it's just a tool. I think it's just a little bit. There's this real air of being threatened. Um, um, So I use Twitter a lot, and I really think it's great for just getting a pulse on the design community. And I think there's a real split at the moment. There's a lot of designers saying, "Holy shit, this is amazing." Like I've done all these cool generations. You do it too. Like put prompt in the comment, and I'll send you the prompt or whatever. And then there's this other area of designers which are like, I think they're much wiser, in my opinion. And the sentiment in that kind of community is like, let's just wait and see. Um, like there's so much speed and movement with the tools. Like we need to just kind of like wait and see where things are at, then make an informed decision about like how impactful this is. Um, I remember seeing when Figma released their AI features, maybe I don't know 7 or 8 months ago, where you could generate UI all in the app. And then someone commented that it looked exactly like Apple's weather app, and they rolled it back. Um, and I think that when I first saw that, I was like, okay, cool, that's me done. Like, or that's at least product designers, just UI designers that seem screwed. And I guess having that kind of like gestation period or whatever was really helpful. I think that's what we should be doing at the moment, is just sitting back and just sort of letting things kind of stew a little bit before decisions are made. But um, I think I was saying to you earlier about what I think is something that could not be AI proof, but something where value can definitely be put into is something which I think will take a long time personally for AI to kind of take over, is kinetic typography. Um, I think it's all good and well, I guess, to render a very static image with typography, but I still think there's like a wee while. I don't know how long that might be. It could even be 6 months to a year, but leaning into the moving image um, could be like an interesting career path that I was considering, just adopting a new skill set about learning. I'm just as you are. I'm really excited by Cavalry, in the way that it kind of this is a Cavalry app. Um, it's like sort of a more kind of simple vector-based version of After Effects. It's how I describe it, and it's very procedural based, as
I
you.
think if anyone listens to this podcast, they know because I just chat about it all the time.
Yeah, cavalry's the shit, and I think that one of the things that's really drawing me to it is that a lot of really great kind of typography, kinetic typography designers are using it, and you can do stuff that like looks like generative code stuff. It looks like it's been not done in After Effects. It looks like it's been coded. And that really kind of like spoke to me. I thought, wow, this is this is an awesome tool, and it's like relatively easy to put things together. Um, so I think that's probably the next step for me, and it's quite a scary one because I've never done a video professionally. Um, but I think
After my
that
job, Tom.
no, but like it would be from a completely different angle. It would be from, I don't know, making a really cool effect that could be used
Yeah.
in social.
Cannot wait to see what you do with that. Like the background that you have and bringing that into it'd just be so exciting.
I,
Um,
I think yeah, it excites me, and I think it would be uh it'd be interesting to see how usable they are. Maybe it's literally just like an animated version of my more like static design, but um it's it gets more likes online. Like, not to sound superficial, like part of a lot of designers' role these days is like their kind of online footprint. You know, it's a way of kind of making your mark and being seen by, the rest of the world. But the posts that I've done recently that have done much better is when there's things moving, there's a little story happening, or there's like an effect which feels a little bit magical and people can't get it straight away. I think something I've really moved against or moved away from is just posting like static geometrical compositions, because they are now very easy to do. There's like loads of people that are doing them, and I think there's just so many references online. Um, it's just harder and harder to make stunning compositions in a static frame. It's a tricky one. So I think for me that, I guess it's the future of branding. I really is just the moving brand, how your brand's moving. And I guess there's loads of fantastic potential at Glide to bring that to life. And I know it's a journey that you know you're on, and I'm on, is how brand, and I guess eventually product is how that comes into the product, and how, yeah, motion ties all that together. I think that's really exciting. Um, yeah,
cool. Tom, thanks, man. This has been great. To chat more formally than usual, and also like go deeper than we would normally, because usually it's like a handover or whatever. So I appreciate getting your insight on all this. It's been great.
yeah. Thanks, Jack. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I think that, just as I did with my mates back at university after a couple of beers, I can speak about design forever. I think it's such a personal thing, and I know that you are um, a designer at heart, and you can feel what I can feel, and I think it's really nice to connect on that level. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me on your show. I appreciate it.
I'll see you in Slack.
Cheers, mate.